We're rolling, Allie. Welcome back to the Disrupt Education Podcast. I've got Allie Privet here. How you doing, Allie?
I am very well, and I have just a really cool story from this past weekend that we were kind of talking about for the podcast, but I think it's a great way to kick off this series for the fall. Uh and so I jump at a local drop zone in Wisconsin, Skydive Wissota, and this past weekend we had someone who cannot see, is legally blind, visually impaired, actually like completely blind. There's different levels of blindness.
hmm
Jumped out of the airplane, and it she just spoke about like, you know, there is no limit to what you can do. The only limits you put on yourself are the ones you like self-impose. And just to see her experience that and like, I mean, there's so much community around her and everything. It's definitely on the news if you just search visually
Wow.
impaired blind woman jumps out of airplane. I'm sure it'll pop up. But it just kind of like reinvigorated my own kind of journey. And for those in education, I think it's a great message that you can apply to be limitless and push yourself out of your comfort zone, whatever that is. Doesn't have to be an airplane, but yes, it was
Yeah, that's
exciting.
that's amazing. I'm guessing like once sense one of your sensory of everything's got to be so incredibly intense if you can't see. I have no idea, but
Mhm.
that's got to be amazing. Maybe we should get her on the podcast too. I don't know. I think that'd be
I'll try and
wild.
get her.
Try to connect it. But that does lead us into our guest today, who is kind of launching off. This person got a hold of me, I would say, I don't know, a couple months ago. And as we started our conversation and connecting with people and doing some different things, there's a lot of synergy here. There's a lot of things that this person is building, taking risks, taking chances. We have Scott Carr with us. How you doing, Scott?
Not bad.
All
Thanks,
right.
thanks for the
So
invite. Appreciate
yeah,
it.
no, 100%. So, can you give like a brief overview of who you are and what you do right now, and then we'll start to dig into, the action that you're taking and how you're creating things.
Yeah, you bet. I work in Wisconsin for one of our 12 CISA agencies. It's a collaborative agency in our state that supports our local school districts. So we do a lot of different supportive service type work in our state. And I've been in education for over 30 years and started out as a special education teacher and just evolved into what I'm doing right now, which is really kind of very innovative in our state, but really circulates itself around a real need in regards to the work that I'm doing. But I've been doing this for probably the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years, with a more of a focus around this readiness approach and helping districts kind of transform themselves. I've been an administrator or in that line of work for about a dozen years, but it allowed me, I was as a special ed teacher, it allowed me to move through recognizing that, a lot of our students can't quite find their purpose. And it was easy for me to get our kids, the students I worked with, to that finish line. But when they walk out and they're still disconnected to, real life opportunities, it was kind of hard for me to deal with that. So I've always had that focus on career readiness, community readiness, and lo and behold, here we are, at my age. That's kind of what all school districts, really need, that transformation process. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit of where I'm at with who I work for, and
Mhm.
it's really taken off.
For those who may not be as familiar with, the kind of career and community readiness on a state level, because I don't think we've actually had someone at kind of the range and like at a whole state level, the type of work that you do. Can you kind of like just dig in a little bit to like what does that look like at a school that has like the type of work and programs that you support versus more of a traditional model, like in what opportunities would students have through the type of programming you support that is disruptive and innovative, not necessarily what school looked like when you or I or
Yeah,
Peter went to school.
yeah, long time ago. Yeah, for sure. Well, we've done some great work in our state. Like I say, our CISAs really do a nice job of supporting districts. Our state at our DPI level has a very solid, career, we call it ACP, Academic and Career Planning, in our state. It became public law here in Wisconsin back in 2017. So every school has to have a plan, an academic and career plan for grades 6 through 12. And we got great leadership at our state level. What typically ends up happening is I go into schools and I recognize it's really easy, and you can recognize pretty quickly that there's a lot of that work going on, right? There's a lot of career readiness work. There's a lot of CTE work. We're moving our state forward in Wisconsin career pathways. We're identifying right now we've got 9 regional career pathways that schools can embrace. And that typically, obviously happens at that high school level. And so when I get in this process of academic and career planning with school districts, I ask the question, are you doing academic and career planning, or is it your culture? Is it really embedded in every single classroom? And more times than not, I'll get those that I'm initially meeting with will kind of step back and typically say, yeah, we do this through advisory. We use the platform Zello, and they're doing Zello lessons. And we'll get into the conversation of asking what kind of impact do you think that's having? And a lot of the times you'll get a pushback, or not necessarily a pushback, but you'll get a little bragging kind of, especially some of the districts that are doing pretty well with this, about some of the work that they've been doing. And there is really good work, don't get me wrong. But then I'll ask the question, what if I went into a 10th grade classroom and, an algebra classroom, and pulled a kid out and asked them, what's your purpose? What would be the response of a student? And typically, at that point, most will kind of sit back and like, oh boy, I'm not sure we want to go ask that question. And, you'll get somebody kind of joke and say, you think a kid, at that level would be able to answer a question like that? And I said, I've done it, in the schools I've worked with. I've went in, I've asked this probably, 100 times the kids. And usually what I'll get is, what do you mean? Right. And then you have to redirect it to, what's your purpose here in this class? And we talk about, if it's not dialed into what your purpose is as a school system, I don't know, what you've been doing. I don't know if it's really aligning. So that's the starting point. A lot of the times is we start with that question. We lead ourselves to the question of, well, what is the fundamental purpose of an educational system? And that really gets us, having strong conversation, because ultimately the work that I've been doing as I enter into school systems is to transform that school system into a career, community, life readiness, type of an approach, all the way down to the kindergarten level. And so that usually gets attention when we start talking about what would a kid in 2nd or even 5th grade, how would they answer that question? What's your purpose? And we also talk a little bit about, well, what's academic and career planning? Why does that start at 6th grade, not at kindergarten? So it really gets people, really thinking, which is really the best part, at the entry point. It's kind of scratch your heads around the why.
Which that's going to lead me into, and by the way, I don't know about you, Allie. I think if you're watching this, you can kind of see us looking down. Like, I'm taking a ton of notes, Scott. This is awesome. So I'm like, yes, because this is I would call this, unfortunately, cutting edge things, right? It shouldn't be cutting edge. We should have been doing this, or we're kind of doing this maybe in a previous generation and all that. But so, finding your why and what's your purpose, and, who are we? Well, let me back it up just a little bit, because I know that you have shared with us, but not the listeners yet. Like, who are you? Like, right? Usually when you get into an area like this. There's, and Allie and I have talked about it with a lot of our guests. There's always something there that like triggered us to do something different in education, to take some risks, to really see a problem. There's a couple of places you're on when you were growing up, and then also you mentioned in the conversations and in the bios that you shared with us about your own kids, and then going through all the different I would say like the employee places where you were in education. When you see a plethora of things, you learn a lot of things. Unpack that for us, right? So what
Sure.
was Scott when he was young? What was his family like? And then, you know, what were the gaps, the lack of purpose that you saw in yourself, or maybe people close to you while they're going through the system? And then, you know, that's your why, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's a great question. And I find this very relevant to kind of where I've ended up in my career right now. Yeah, I was the youngest of three boys in a family that my dad was an over-the-road truck driver for over 60 years. My mom was a waitress. Fortunately, we lived in a small town in Wisconsin, and both of my brothers had the opportunity to go on to college. They both had the opportunity to go on and play college football, both of them in the Big Ten, right? So a lot of pressure on me, and I just could not really find any purpose in education, right? I was athletic. I enjoyed what we could do after school and some of those types of things, but I just couldn't live what I saw my brothers doing,
Mhm.
diving into academics. I didn't see that a purpose in it, and so I was pretty probably much actively disengaged, and so my dad had said, "No, you're either going to go to college, or drive a truck." And I'm like, "Okay, I think going to college is what I'd rather do right now." And I was fortunate enough to play college football myself, so that got me there. And then I got through, and then it was still, now what, right? I finished with an education degree in physical education, and I actually finished not even being certified. I
Mhm.
went to work for a company in Wisconsin here called Quad Graphics as a fitness instructor.
Hmm.
And after a couple years, I kind of got sick of making like $4.50 an hour, and so I thought, well, I want to go back. I went back, got certified. Still couldn't find myself a teaching position in Fayette. I took a job at a residential treatment facility and worked there, and it was pretty intense. I worked with some inner city kids in what was called an intensive day treatment program, and I really fell in love with it. It was just high behavioral problem students, one step away from incarceration, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
And I found my calling, I guess. Relationships and working with kids. I could easily get those kids to the finish line, and that wasn't hard. Eventually, I ended up working in public school for about 16 years before I went into administration. And getting kids to that finish line of graduation was easy, but watching them walk out and not see their purpose and not be able to get engaged into a career or even a job sometimes was a struggle for me to watch. So in my work in some of the public schools I worked in, I created what really kind of was academic and career planning already. I took the opportunity to connect students to, local community people in the trades, and lo and behold, those kids would find themselves. I've gone back to some of these communities, and they're still working in the same jobs. So it just was a passion of mine to see kids be successful, probably because I lived it myself. I struggled. And then also, yeah, I've got two kids. One's 24 and one is 22, both in the educational field. My son, very self-guided, really could, he saw his purpose, his calling. He works for a family youth program in Milwaukee. My daughter, on the other hand, she wants to become a first or a second grade teacher. I think she'd be outstanding at it. But she had a harder time finding her purpose, right? She's one of those statistics that we read about. She's going to go an extra year in college because she couldn't find her way. She probably could have started maybe even in a tech school or a smaller college initially. I'm just hoping she's not one of those statistics that we talk about that, graduated and then went into a gray collar type job, until their middle 30s. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I saw the system as being broke. And as I helped evolve it with, working with, higher needs students around this type of work, like I said before, here we are in an educational system, I think that mimics that ultimate need of that transformational change, something drastic. So yeah,
Mm.
it's been a good journey. Um, got a few years left, I think. Hoping.
It part of your, I mean, your story is incredible, so thank you for sharing. The part that I heard was I lived it myself. Do you think that was like a turning point for you? Of like when you saw students struggling, and you saw how you could help, but it's still not necessarily being enough to get them to find their purpose. Like you're helping them graduate, you're helping them get to the next step. But where was it where you really felt like you have found your purpose? Because you said you struggled in your own academic journey, like, is it the work you're doing now? Was it, like, I mean, it's transformed, but when did you really kind of feel like I am living in my purpose? Because it, even though we want students to find their purpose and have meaning in the K through 12 system, and I think that's amazing, sometimes it takes longer. But having a good educational system to kind of develop in can foster that sooner or kind of root people
Yeah.
better. Um, so yeah, when did you feel like I really found my purpose and like everything connected?
Yeah. Great question. Makes me kind of wonder a little bit, right? I think that there were times as I went through my journey that, wow, here's a sweet spot that I'm feeling more valued, maybe, and even, more connected to who I am and in what I should be doing. Um, and really, isn't it unfortunate that here I am, later in my career, and I'm landing in a spot that I'm really feeling like I've hit my purpose home run, right? Where I'm able to give back maybe. Maybe the legacy is you're a part of really a systematic change that really needed to happen a long time ago. Because we're always having these conversations in education, right? I mean, if we live in a constant state of reform. Now, I mean, should it be reform or should it be, we're going to constantly grow and look at new ideas and innovate, right? Or iterate on it, right? So I guess, as I look back, I wish it would have happened sooner, right? I mean, I kind of joke, I went into public education in my late 20s. And the advice I give, and I'm giving to my daughter, right, because she's going to go into public education, is start early so you can retire a little earlier. As part of that system, I'm like, okay, I got to wait a little bit longer because I got a later start. But I think that we don't focus enough at that purpose in our school system. I think we're afraid to maybe. A lot of the work that I'm doing, we start to talk about. I identify it as a career identity as a part of the framework that I bring into schools, and when I have that conversation with school administrators, teachers, they look at it and go, "Well, really, we're going to tell a kid in first or second grade what they're going to become?" And I'm like, "No, that's not really what it is." We know that by the age of 7, our DNA, our attributes, and our characteristic traits are developed in us, right? I'm a very caring person, a very compassionate person. Those are things that are a part of me. We also know that there's a natural match to your characteristics, your attributes, to what you eventually become and end up doing, right? And usually where that sweet spot is hitting is usually in the mid 30s. And in that transformation, in that time that you transition through it, though you want to have that great journey of life, you don't need to job hop, to 5 different careers in relationship to that. I don't know that that does anybody any good. The economy, our businesses, and or yourself. We also know that in our educational system, kids foreclose on school as early as 9 and 10 years old. So when you look at that equation, right? No wonder we see a system that's built off of what I call that apprenticeship through observation, where we've lived it, right? We've lived the system. That's the system we know. And I think where I'm different is that, because teachers, they performed at a relatively high level through the system. So that's the system they know. They want to protect it. Yet what makes us adjust and change is being able to, have those different adverse experiences. Right. So the system needs to change. We shouldn't be grasping onto it. And if we would look at some of the real simple pieces to it, I think we would see the end result. We would see less anxiety out of kids, right? Because they don't know their purpose and they can't align their priorities, from their purpose. Can you imagine what's going through their minds, right? Attendance would increase. We would have less behavioral issues. A lot of those types of things, I think, would be the end result. So, yeah, I mean, my purpose, I wish I would have landed on it earlier, maybe, but I really love what I'm doing now. Yeah.
I really like, I mean, we do have similar stories, Scott. Like, I mean, I started same out of college. I mean, I played the game fine. Education, I was going to go to college no matter what. That was just what my path was. But I remember getting out of college and no idea, what I really wanted to do. I had a communications major. I had some skills and different things like that. Um, I actually got into education because I didn't like high school. I was like, I came in late as well. I was like 29, 30 years old when I got my first education job, which now my peers are starting to retire too. That's funny. But it's all good, So, one of the things that as you're speaking, what you're seeing and stuff, I hear something that I experienced. So I wanted to ask you about it. When you're dealing with high risk or the a special ed area in education, which I had an opportunity to work with certain individuals and that would be labeled as that in some of my earlier career positions. I loved it. Like I loved it because it was I could take risks with them. I could do innovative things with them. They were teaching me what was wrong with the system while you're hearing them, right? So you know, as we're talking about, helping a school in a bigger system, how individualistic is this thing looking to you coming up into the next 5 years, or maybe some of the things that you're already working on when you're working with the schools to find not only the system or that school's culture and their fundamental purpose, but like how do you get that down to an individual level? What kind of things have you seen? And maybe you did play with this with some of the at-risk students and such.
Yeah, that's a great question. I like I don't know if you know Justin Reich, and he wrote the book Iteration. I'm sure you probably do, right? I like how he describes and talks about the best work in education is done by teachers to teachers behind the doors that most of our administration and leaders don't even know what's going on. Right. So what does that tell us? Right. It tells us that the system itself and how the implementation process behind it hasn't really worked, right? Whether people want to admit it or not, there's kind of that us them mentality in our structure, in our industry a little bit. But what I've found to work is you got to go through that same process, not only with those that are the decision makers, but those that are the doers, right? So I like to form the approach. My framework is really built on the why, what, how. And I pair up the why, what, how in a professional development approach with the why has to represent itself in a retreat style type of approach. In a retreat style, right? What is that, right? A lot of times, get off campus, go somewhere else, you know, loosen up a little bit. But it's built off of exploration, discovery, asking questions, reviewing what's happening, what are other people doing well, how do we get ourselves there? And so if we go that route at the front end with everybody at each stage, you're going to have more success, because what you'll end up having then is that cognitive investment, the rationale, I like to call rationale investment out of individuals. Why are we going to do this? Will start to exist. And then that'll lead into that emotional investment, right? Which is some great, it's a great direction to go, because that gets you to that believe in, right? People wanting to become a part of that overall vision. We move to the what. The what is, in a professional development approach, the what tends to be training. It's that learning of new stuff. What is it? We spend a ton of time in education, right? When we have professional development, we bring in those heavy hitters that can tell us what it is. Think of PLC in a concept, part of it. Great work by the DeForge, right? I mean, just brilliant work. And kind of how schools push that work forward is come and tell you about it. This is what it is. And then you move into the how, right? And we, even as a leadership team, are going to tell you how to do it, right? We think that we're involving the voice of others, voice choice, but typically we don't go to the depth that we need to with that, because the how is probably the most important. And what I like to do is help districts get to the level of how is done in a workshop concept. And it's developed, the workshop itself is developed by the doers, which ends up being the educators, right? And at the end result of this, we should be able to have a strategic plan pulled together by the teachers, not by the administration team, not by inviting a few people from the community in. And all of a sudden we have this document that aligns to our mission that's on, our website. How many teachers do you think you can go into in a school system and go, hey, what's your mission? What are the 4 pillars of our strategic plan? Are they going to be able to identify it and then be able to say, this is what's happening in my classroom that relates to that? If we go through the way I described it, and the process also includes 2 different teams. One, a strategic team, which has some of the decision makers on it, but it also has some middle, what I call like that middle management, middle leadership. That could be a CTE teacher, it could be counselors, it could be literacy or math coaches, but they're a part of helping pull together what our priorities need to be, right? And those should be somewhat subjective, right? A lot around career readiness, culture, the relationship between academics and careers, stuff like that. But then we shift the work to what we call a readiness team, and that is strictly just educators. And so I'm a part of this process. And what really stands out is what I call that leadership behavior of traditional thinking. You'll see a lot of some of the best coaching that I like to get involved in is helping administrators say this when they're asked, how do we do this? To simply just say, I don't know. What a great problem to have. I'm sure you guys will figure it out, and turn around and kind of walk off. Right. And typically what I'll say is, after you take about 3 steps of walking away, turn around and say, let me know how I can help. Because you never want to leave it as, I'm sure you'll figure it out. But that's typically when I get into schools, where I see the systems flaw is that we can easily tell our teachers what it is they need to do and how to do it. And that breaks down the system itself. So it's delicate, it's hard, it takes a long time. You gotta have some patience, man. Have some patience.
Work you are doing is definitely not a 1 year type work. For those who may maybe think that it is, it's not. The it's refreshing to hear that this type of work is being done. I never experienced that type of kind of re-envisioning, what the culture is or and how to align it from all levels. Because the what I understand from my own experience and other teachers' experiences at other districts is very typical to come back from a summer break, which this
Yeah.
episode will be coming out right around the start of the school year. So let us know if this is your experience for those listening. But you come in and you're fresh off of summer, you're full of excitement. You have like a week or two to prepare for the upcoming school year, and you're hit with an 8 a.m. meeting from the principal and the assistant principals and the leaders, potentially other leaders of the school district, depending on the size. And you're hit with, this is what we're working on this year. This is all the stuff, new stuff you have to do. This is the new thing we're implementing. And you're just basically told a line item list of all of the new and exciting things that the administration and district leaders have decided to dump on you. And it's probably different than the year
Right.
before.
Yeah.
It's like they threw out what they got maybe a quarter of the way through. It was always something new. They never felt like they sat on something long enough. Now, I'm sure there are different experiences. Obviously, the work you're doing sounds like it is different and it's long term. I can't say how many times Peter and I have said school districts have to be willing to invest a decade worth of time into the change. Like, we actually have had some people on the podcast talk about how it really does take 5 to 10 years to invest
Yeah.
in a culture to really change it. And I don't know if we got lost in the last like 20-30 years of education, but like it's been like, let's do this exciting thing for a year, maybe 2, and if you got 3 years, that was wild.
Yeah.
So
Right.
what I'm curious, the timeline realistically to kind of do the process that you're talking about, in a school district level, what is that to really make change in the work that you're doing? What do you see as a timeline? And obviously it's not hard and fast, but just, like, what does a culture shift
Yeah.
look like for the work that you do?
That's a great question. Well, the first thing I did when I pulled out the document, which was called the 100-day plan for our organization to kind of map out some things for a district, I changed the 100, I added a 0. I said, we're going to shift this to 1,000-day plan, just so everybody knows. But really, truthfully, behind it, we've even shifted even our service agreements and how we work with our districts. And we're seeing districts that I've been working with enter into 2 and even 3-year contracts in regards to, to the work. But, going back to how you describe it, right? I mean, it made me cringe a little bit, coming in. Not so much that the end of your summer is over, but that hearing what you hear from the district is so traditional, right? So one of the things we do to get away from that, because it is the first year is truly cultural change. But it's very unique because cultural change can't be the only thing you're working on, right? Because the district office level team is going to be like, all right, we need more for our money than just this. We're not about just changing the culture. What are some of the things we're actually going to do? So we do implement the readiness team does do some of the work out of a piloted approach that we eventually very slowly bleed into them inviting a couple other people into the work as the year goes on, only if the culture embraces it, right? Because it goes back to Justin's work, is that it's already happening. Let's take advantage of the fact that so and so on our readiness team is going to want to bleed this work out into some of their friends. So we're going to try to take advantage of that. So typically we have that going on. We have the aha of, oh yeah, we need to do things differently. And I help the district with a lot of the communication plans around it. Like, where's the sweet spot to engage in letting your families know, letting the community know? Because ultimately the district itself has to land on, we are in a revisioning, reimagining and redefining student success approach, right? Because this is going to look different. We talk about, are you an achievement type school, or are you a readiness school? There's, you can kind of, go back and forth with that. But that communication plan is really huge on the front end. The ability to start some of the work that fits and aligns to the strategic priorities by a team that's doing it in a piloted approach, and we're taking advantage of the moments where they want to share out and that they want to brag and that they want to invite others, but not always on that platform of out in front of, at a staff meeting, right? We try to really stay away from traditional educational approaches because we just feel that we need a great shift in it, to the point of actually even calling our teachers something other than teachers. So that cultural transformation will take at least a year. One of the things I find is probably where I have the most fun in this work, because as I said, I was an administrator, but I was not a real good one, right? That's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I was an associate principal, and I just was all about kids. And sometimes when I wasn't supporting teachers, it was like, who is this guy? So, but one of the things I really enjoy doing is in my line of work, within our strategic resources, we call it, we identify, we T-chart this out, and I bring up the concept of responsibility versus opportunity, right? So what we do is I ask, this is great summer work, and I've done this with the districts that I've been working with recently. So we identify everything that the district office or district leadership is asking their teachers to be doing. We get this really long work and list of the work. Obviously things like PLCs and student outcomes and learning targets and all these different educational pieces. And then I describe the difference between responsibility and opportunity. And I say, all right, responsibility is something you feel like you have to do, right? Opportunity is something you want to do. So as a teacher, let's look at this list and let's put all the things that we feel that they look at as a responsibility on the left-hand side, and anything they look at as an opportunity on the right-hand side. And we get in a little bit of an argument sometimes trying to, because if I'm a curriculum and instruction director and I own some of that, I want it to feel like it's opportunistic for teachers, right? But at the end of the day, about 90% of it's going to land on the left-hand side. And we do the same exact thing with teachers in relationship to what their kids in their classroom feel. And so there's a relationship between the two that really grounds us in. We have to start looking at things that we're asking of our staff to be opportunistic. And opportunities come through experiences. They don't come through things that I'm going to tell you what they are and then tell you how to do it. That's where the why, what, how concept really lands itself and really kind of builds some strong momentum. Because I often in that activity, which usually takes us a couple hours to do with a district, I have to pull them back to, do we need to do more why? Do we need to recognize that not only are our students disengaged, but our teachers are disengaged? And that's a tough conversation, which then allows us then to consider, what does our communication plan need to look like? And we find ourselves talking then about leadership, transformational leadership behaviors versus a true communication plan, if you would, right? It's how we behave and what we're asking of others as we start that first year process. But as many will say, probably the biggest challenge in this work is that it hasn't been done yet. So I don't have the answer for what it looks like year 2, year 3. I'm just living right now in that year 1 to 2 with this transformation with some great school districts.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's and I appreciate you kind of walking through that. I love the responsibility versus opportunity and listing that out. That would make, I wish they did that earlier, or I learned that earlier in my career. I think that's a very key point. I think that's That's huge when it comes to burnout at any level. If you understand, hey, this is an opportunity. Once I started looking at things that way, and my fellow educators that are around me, that are innovative and kind of cutting edge, that changed everything.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of things about, why teachers stay a long time, but really, what attracted to me into this newer system that I'm working at, coming up this year, is like what you said. It's the culture. The culture is, how can we do this better? Like, and it's legit. It's not like, hey, we're just going to throw this on a newsletter. Like, it's, how can we do this better, and what can we do for you, whether you're a teacher, administrator, a student, a parent?
Yeah.
How can we do this better? And simple words of culture like that actually back themselves up. Yes, I'm sure there's going to be people in the staff calf having a bad day or whatever. All these things happen. And I think that's a major, major piece. And once you have most people working at that level, then you can start going deeper. Um, so kind of to wrap up here a little bit, what I wanted you to share is anything that you're missing, but is there something, is there like a pinnacle client, you don't have to reveal who they are, or a school that is doing something now that you see like, wow, this is what it looks like now, and man, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I don't mind mentioning the schools and a couple of the people that are working. I'll give you a couple of real good examples. Delavan Darian here in the state of Wisconsin, I think, has ventured down this path. We've been working together for almost 2 years, and the superintendent over there, Drew Helbezma, has done a great job. Another gentleman by the name of Mike Rick, who is their ACP and CTE coordinator, really have embraced this. Drew does an outstanding job of being able to lead in that transformational leadership process, right? As I mentioned before, coaching up administrators, if you would, or leaders, on not only to be ready for some really tough questions that are going to come their way in regards, from educators that we're asking to do this different work, coaching them up that they're going to come, but how to respond, I think, is vital. And Drew does an outstanding job. He's the one that landed on, yeah, what a great problem to have. I'm sure you guys will figure it out. He nailed it. I'm like, wow, that's really good. But so I think he's going to be a guy that's easy to follow, which I think is really, really key. Somebody that, you have to be somebody that's truly invested in it, right? You believe in it. Like, you really have that cognitive investment, but more so that emotional investment. Because, I mean, we both have played, we've all, been involved in sports, right? So those are the types of individuals that you're gonna go to bat for and really work hard for. So they've been doing some great work there. It's transformed itself right into classrooms. Interestingly, they've not followed through the process exactly as maybe it should go, but that's been a benefit, because what we've seen is the readiness team themselves have recognized, well, we missed something. And what they missed in the whole process is they jumped to that career connected learning process really quickly, but they leapfrogged over the career and community connectedness or the career community identity for kids. Like, they didn't dive into who are you, what's your attributes. And so the work itself wasn't quite as intentful as it could be. But the best thing about what we saw there was that they recognized that they missed it. We didn't have to come in and say, hey, let's back up, let's go back to the what. So we really saw this true investment of cultural change. But it hasn't been easy, man. It hasn't been easy. It's a monster. The other I would say that I found was really, really cool is I'm working with another school, Waterloo, Wisconsin, and part of this work involves working with the school boards. So I've done a retreat twice with their school board. And of course, some of the work, obviously, because we had been about a year into this, some of the work around that strategic purpose had already been outlined by the process we go through. So we put it up on up on the board for them to reflect on. And we paired it with the mission statement. And we did a little activity where we said, all right, what do you see as similarities? What do you see that, compare contrast kind of a thing? And they go back and forth. And it got to a point where because the purpose, real simple, right? Most times when we ask what's the fundamental purpose, it lands on preparation, right? Every kid leaves our building career ready. It's as simple as that, right? I mean, if you're career ready, you're going to be life ready, you're going to be community ready. So they looked at what we had as every kid a graduate, career, community, and life ready with a focus on future readiness. Kind of simple. And their mission was pretty long. And they came to the conclusion that we'd rather have that. It makes more sense. The purpose. So it was a really cool process that we went through with, your board members are made up of your community people. They don't live education. They don't know what it's like. They don't know the culture, right? And what happens in your school system. So they're able to look at something like that and put some real practical sense to it and say, let's move, towards that. And so that was a good experience. I talk about it a lot, not a lot of the other schools that I get involved in, because, exposing somebody to your board around work like this, that's a risk. It's a kind of a high risk sometimes. But those are two great examples, I think, of, a couple schools doing some, really, what I look at as really solid work around this.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Before we get to, connecting with you and having people reach out, I always ask Allie some of your final thoughts on the conversation, Allie. I know you got a lot.
I can't sum this one up in probably a really succinct
1,000
manner.
days.
The depth of this conversation is, you're gonna have to listen to this episode twice. I'm gonna have to re-listen to it to process everything that you're saying, because it shouldn't feel so disruptive. Like, the work that you're doing seems like it should have been there all along. I love it, this very integrated, and it seems a gentle approach, but strategically gentle, and getting it to be everybody involved, and get everybody to kind of question, why are we here? Because if the culture is in alignment, then the students will feel that. And I think that, for me, when I was in school, even though it was traditional and everything, I did feel as though the community was mission focused on getting kids to college. Now that, doesn't necessarily make sense for a lot of communities. And so we need to shift to figure out, what does the community need and how do we move that forward? And I really, really like what you said about just the kids kind of driving that. If they are sitting there well, I don't know why I'm here. Then right. It's clear from that level all the way up. And teachers who have done well in the system coming back and maybe trying to hold on to it because it's it worked for them, and really trying to release that is so powerful. And we definitely need more of the work. I'm proud to say I've lived in Wisconsin and that this is happening in the state I'm currently podcasting in. I do jump between Minnesota and Wisconsin, but we're definitely going to have you back on. I can already tell, because we have just scratched the surface of what you are doing and the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for kind of kicking off this school year with, I think, giving every level, especially administration and district leaders, something they might need to hear. Maybe don't start the school year with, here's everything we need to do, and maybe start the conversations with, hey, I don't know how we're going to do that, but I'm sure you can figure it out. And putting that power back on the doers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One of the things in that meeting with that school board that I brought up, and I took a little risk with it, and they loved it, I think, afterwards, is that, the study from Georgetown University that came out just recently about by year 2030, less than 30% or around 30% of our industries and jobs that are going to be out there will require a 4-year degree or higher, only 30%, right? So I play that clip. I think it was Kevin Fleming had said it. And so I play the clip, right? Rather than me saying, I play a clip. And then I turn and look and I said, what about the other 70%? What are we doing for them? And so if you think about it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if we really are kind of holding on to tradition and college is the direction that, we're striving kind of to go, what are we doing about, those others? So we've done a ton of work in all of our states. Wisconsin has also, to recognize it and to offer some things. But the system itself is not embracing it right down to the kindergarten level in every single classroom. And I really believe that process is possible.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like we are been doing this podcast for a long time, and this is the most that we've talked about career community and an academic career kind of connecting. I've always been a person who likes to connect reality and academia, right? So Scott, you coming on and really doing this work at that level, bringing it in, to schools and breaking it down. People can reach out to you, but obviously you want to highlight, I think you have this webinar series, and then a conference and convention coming up. But how can people connect with you on any level, and then see and learn from you? What are your steps in going deeper?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, anybody can reach out to me through our CESA 2 our website, and that's CESA number 2, or you can just simply email me, scott.carr@cesa2.org. So it's as simple as that. I love, as you know, Peter, that's how I met you, right? Reaching out and saying, hey, let's have a chat and talk about this. So I love networking, and what I do with who I network is I try to pass them on to those schools that I'm working with and other people that I work with. So it'd be great to hear from people if they're interested. Sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, and I can't wait. I know that I get to be a part of a little bit of the webinar and some of the conference things coming up. And all that, is that going to be posted? Where can people see that information?
Yeah, we'll eventually get it on our CESA 2 website. As you know, I mean, you've been doing this a long time, and it's not easy to move something like that forward. So
yeah,
we're hoping the webcast, right? We're calling it The Future is Clear, CCLR, a little play on an acronym there. And then Teach Like It's 2045, I think, is a little bit of a catch that we want people to start to look at. That's what this is about. So we've got some solid people lined up for at least the webcast. We're looking at, in April to be able to offer maybe a 2-day convention conference around it, and then lead it out from there and see what happens. But it's all about networking.
See, you're doing it just like the superintendent. You're like, this is a great problem to have. Well, let's see what we can do, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Scott, again, thank you so much for reaching out, and obviously sharing, how you're changing education into your why, sharing your story. Really appreciate it. A true disruptor of education. And please, listeners, I definitely have like at least a page of notes down here. I think I'm going to have to, even though Scott and I have talked a few times, I'm going to have to re-listen to this again, just to go deep. But thanks again for being here, man.
Hey, you bet. And thank you to the two of you for all you do around this kind of work, man. It means a lot. Thanks.
All right. We appreciate it. And we appreciate you, the listener. For Ali Privet, I'm Peter Hostrasser. We'll catch you next time on the Disrupt Education Podcast. Thanks for listening. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrasser or Allie Privet.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.